Hey everyone, welcome back to English 1001. In this week's video, I'm going to introduce you to the Essay 2 assignment and to the database you will use to complete the assignment. So let's take a look. Here I am on the Essay 2 assignment sheet, which you can find in our current learning module on Blackboard. And the results of the vote are that students want to study database topics. So that's what we'll be discussing in Unit 2. So thank you for your vote on that. So I'll just read through most of the assignment sheet with you and try to anticipate questions that you might have and clarify them for you. Once I get through the assignment sheet, we'll take a quick look at the database that you'll be using for this unit. So the overview for the assignment states that you're going to be comparing and contrasting viewpoints on a topic selected from a database article, and that the essay will illuminate for your reader the similarities and differences that you discover about your topics, both overt and subtle. And then finally, in this essay, you'll be using summaries and paraphrases from that source to help build your credibility as an author. So how do we go about tackling this project? The first thing you need to do is select an acceptable topic. And I want to really stop here and emphasize, and I'll encourage you to make a mental note or maybe even a physical note to yourself that you must write about one of the topics that is presented in the table on the assignment sheet. So you'll see a list of acceptable topics here. There are, I think like 24 that you have to choose from. So you do have a little bit of leeway as far as what you want to write about. But I do want to stress that you must write on one of the topics from that list and that no other topics are acceptable for this essay. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, please do let me know. So once you've landed on your topic, you're going to learn about your topic or maybe the various viewpoints on it. So the first thing that you'll consider is your own prior knowledge about the topic. And I would encourage you to actually maybe even sit down and take some notes about that. What do you already know about this topic? And maybe consider what you would hope to learn about it. Next up, you can consider what is common knowledge about the topic. So what is the information related to what you're discussing that it's very likely that your audience already knows and is considered common knowledge? When you've considered your own prior knowledge and the common knowledge of your audience, now we're ready to move on and glean some more new information about your topic. So what I'll ask you to do for that piece of your writing process is to start by reading the Opposing Viewpoints in Context overview article about your topic. Now, you might also wish to read some of the other resources that are linked from those pages, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And those include featured viewpoints and academic journals. It also includes articles from magazines and newspapers, all kinds of stuff. But do keep in mind, and I'll highlight for you here, you should not consult any sources, and you certainly should not cite any sources other than those presented in the Opposing Viewpoints in Context database. So in other words, I am not asking you to go out and conduct your own research. And in fact, I am discouraging you from doing that because we haven't gotten there yet, okay? So make sure that you stay within the database, stay within those overview articles, and then you can also look at the other articles linked from the database. So you've selected your topic, you've done some learning about it. Now you're ready to start noting the differences and the similarities between the topics, or perhaps about the viewpoints on those topics. And I have some examples that I'll give you in a moment that might help clarify that in case you're feeling confused. So when you're considering the similarities and differences that you're going to discuss in Essay 2, you should not only consider what's really obviously similar and different between your two subjects or between the opposing viewpoints on that subject, but you should also consider the subtle differences or the unexpected similarities that you discover. So I'm hoping that you can push this comparison and contrast beyond just a really superficial list of similarities and differences, and maybe explore that subject a little bit more deeply. Now that you've sort of settled on some of the content of your essay, you can start to think about the organizational pattern that you would like to follow. Now, there are two main organizational patterns that we'll discuss in class for comparison and contrast, and those are point by point or subject by subject, which is also known as a block style. So I'll go on in a couple minutes to talk about exactly what that means, but you'll probably want to think pretty early on in your process about how you want to kind of set up your essay. Once you've settled on that organizational pattern, then you're ready to begin writing your draft. And your purpose with writing this draft, again, is to compare and contrast the topic that you have chosen, or perhaps the viewpoints on the topic. So let's look at some examples. So one example could be two different topics or two different subjects, both of which were included in that acceptable list of topics. So I could imagine a student writing a really interesting and successful essay on body piercings versus tattoos, right? Two different subjects, something similar between them, some things different between them. That could be one way to approach this essay, okay? Another way to approach this essay could be to compare and contrast the different viewpoints on a single topic. So the example I give you here would be people who are in favor of school uniforms and people who oppose school uniforms. So where do their beliefs and differences line up? And maybe where do they differ, and how does that play out in real life? So just keep in mind that your essay should be inspired by that list of topics that I give you, right? You need to choose something from that list to write about, but how you sort of approach that topic is really up to you. You do want to be sure that they share a logical basis for comparison. You wouldn't want to be comparing two things that sort of have nothing to do with each other. And if you're unsure about your topic, I would encourage you to let me know early in the semester, and I would be happy to chat with you and talk you through some of the various approaches to your topic and how you might tackle the essay. But try to do that sooner than later. That will help you create a better writing process along the way. One other element I wanted to stress about this essay is that the purpose of this essay is to be informative for your audience. So in other words, your goal is not to be persuasive. It is not to convince your audience to support one side over the other. Instead, your goal is to simply present these similarities and differences that you have discovered so that your audience may draw their own conclusions about the topic. So next up, we just have a list of the acceptable topics from the database. And again, I sort of described to you what that database looks like. And in this essay, you must use one of the articles found in the database as support for your ideas, okay? Now this link will take you to the database, which we'll take a peek at in a moment, but do take great care to read through the acceptable topic list, and I hope that you can find something that you find inspiring or interesting to write about. Now, as far as the general requirements, of course, we need to use MLA format throughout the entire essay, so do keep that in mind. The length requirement for this one is 1,000 to 1,250 words, or about 4 to 5 double-spaced pages. So do please print that word count underneath your heading for me. And of course, I'll ask you to include a clear thesis statement, just like I always do. Now, here's something that's a little bit different from essay one. We are going to be using sources in this essay. So the requirement is that you use at least one of the acceptable articles from that database I keep mentioning in your essay. Now, you can cite from more than one of the articles you discovered in the Opposing Viewpoints database if you wish. That would be perfectly acceptable. But you need to cite from at least one. And again, I will stress, you cannot use any sources other than those provided in the database. Hopefully that makes your life a little bit easier, because at this point, I'm not asking you to conduct research. I'm just giving you reliable sources that have already been sort of vetted, by the folks at the database. So once you select your sources, you're going to summarize or paraphrase at least twice from one of those articles, okay? And that source use should appear within your body paragraphs as evidence for your ideas. Now, you certainly can use a quote like as an attention getter, or maybe at the end of the essay to wrap up your ideas. That's perfectly acceptable as well. But I do need to see some source use in the body of your essay working as evidence, okay? And you'll want to be sure those summaries are properly integrated, punctuated, and cited. And we're going to be discussing in the future how to go about doing that. I do also stress for you here, for this essay, for essay 2, you should not use direct quotations. In other words, you should not use word for word verbatim quotations from your source. Instead, I would like you to use summaries and paraphrases which ask you to use your own language and your own sentence structure for the sources. So yes, and don't forget, of course, to include a citation for your source every time you use it, and we'll be talking about that more in the future here. You should include an MLA style works cited page for the article you cite. And if you do cite more than one article, make sure that you include each of them on the works cited page. We will talk in class or maybe in a weekly video about how to use a program called Noodle Tools, which is available through IVCC's Jacobs Library. I will strongly encourage you to use Noodle Tools to create your works cited page. I'm also going to give you a really helpful hint that you might only hear from me if you bother to sit down and watch the weekly videos. The opposing viewpoints in context database will provide you the works cited entry, I think, for every source that you look at. So if you can work really smart within that database, you may not even have to craft your own works cited entries. You may be able to simply copy it from the database and paste it into your own works cited page. Now, I always encourage students when they do that to double check and make sure that it is correct and accurate and that it, sort of follows the MLA rules the way that it needs to. But if you're able to work smart instead of working hard, I would encourage you to do that because working smart is working hard. So don't forget your works cited page. A couple last tidbits here. Your audience is, of course, your instructor and your members of the class. And typically this type of essay, as opposed to essay 1, would be written in a third person point of view. So instead of approaching it from an I, me, my, I think perspective, you are using the they perspective, that third person, he, she, they, okay? Do strive for a neutral and formal tone. And again, we'll be talking about what formal tone means coming up this unit. This essay is not about your opinion, and I should not be able to glean it from your essay. I should not know, and your audience should not know by the end of the essay what your opinion is on it. You are just simply presenting the facts. Do keep in mind that strong body paragraphs feature a main idea developed with several details that the writer analyzes. And then an effective thesis statement will preview those main ideas. So this essay is worth 100 points and it's worth 20% of your final grade, so a little bit more than essay 1. And if you continue to read through the assignment sheet here, I just offered you some sort of helpful tips and tricks. So please do read this really carefully. I give you some examples of effective and ineffective thesis statements. I advise you to avoid narrating your thesis, making an announcement about what your essay is going to do. And then I also talk a little bit about subject by subject versus point by point organization. So the first one, subject by subject, is when we organize the essay according to the subjects themselves, first discussing one subject and then discussing the next subject. So sometimes, that might mean two pages on the first subject and 2 pages on the second subject. That would be considered subject by subject. It might also mean alternating paragraphs. So we have one paragraph on subject A and then one paragraph on subject B. The next paragraph, we're back to subject A, and then we're alternating back to subject B. So that's subject by subject. That tends to be a little bit of a simpler way to organize these types of essays. So you might keep that in mind. The next option would be the point by point organization. So when you organize point by point, you're discussing both of your subjects, usually within each body paragraph. So instead of having one paragraph on A and one paragraph on B, instead within each body paragraph, we're discussing both of those subjects. So that's usually a little bit more of a sophisticated approach to this type of assignment. And readers sometimes find that a little easier to follow too. There's no right or wrong choice for your essay, whether you use subject by subject or point by point, but I would just encourage you to be thoughtful about your selection and how you want to organize your essay. I do include some links that might be helpful as far as point by point and subject by subject. Something that this one does really, really nicely is explaining very much in depth subject by subject and point by point. So if you'd like some more information about that, check out that link that I provided. One of the last things I mentioned here has to do with citing your sources. Now, again, we're going to go on and continue to talk about this stuff throughout the rest of the unit, okay? But I did just want to give you a heads up right here that I have included examples on the assignment sheet itself of how to cite the different types of sources that you are likely to run into. So as I say right here, most or all of the sources that you find in a database are not going to feature page numbers, because they're electronic sources. So typically when you're citing from those sources, you're going to use the author's last name. And I give you an example right here of an author named Bitar. And you can see two different ways that you might cite a source. And again, we'll be talking about that during this unit. If you happen to run into a source with no author, for example, the overview article in the database may not give a specific author. In that case, we're going to go ahead and cite by the title of whatever article it is that we're looking at. And again, I show you two different methods for citing that. You might place it in parentheses after your summary or paraphrase, or you might go ahead and name your source sort of in the run-up to that piece of evidence. It's really up to you. And again, no worries if you're feeling overwhelmed about citing sources. We'll go on to discuss that during this unit. The last little bit I like to include on every assignment sheet is just some sort of help and troubleshooting tips and tricks for you. So if you're ever at home and you're not able to ask me a question, take a peek down there because you might find a link that could be helpful. So that's the Essay 2 assignment sheet. If you do have any questions, I'll give you a chance to ask in class. But the next thing I wanted to take a peek at was the Opposing Viewpoints in Context database. So you'll notice I provide links to it several places throughout the assignment sheet. And if you happen to be off campus when you are trying to get into the database, you will need to what we call authenticate yourself as an IVCC student. In other words, you need to let the database know that you're a student at an institution that has a subscription to it. So your login for the library databases is the same login as your student email and your password. So if you're off campus and you're trying to get into a library database, excuse me, you can use your student email login and password. If you have issues getting logged in, I am unable to help you with that as an English teacher, but who you can call is the student help desk. So I've included all their information here, including their email address and phone number. So if you ever have any type of login trouble, go ahead and hit up the student help desk. But hopefully you are able to just log in, click on the link, and jump right over to the database. And here you see a list of all the articles that the database lists. Now remember, you can't just go into this page and choose anything willy-nilly off the page. The assignment sheet itself provides you that list of acceptable topics. Now, let's just say for the sake of an example that we had a writer who wanted to talk about addiction and chemical dependency. So you'll notice the list is alphabetized, so you can just find the title of the subject that you've chosen. When you click on the link, the first page you're going to see is kind of an overview page or a landing page. The first article presented at the very top, which everyone should read, this is the article that everyone should read, is the overview article from the database, okay? So I'm going to click read more. And what this article will do is it will present an overview of the topic itself. So in this case, it's going to explain what is addiction and what is chemical dependency. It gives any relevant information that you might need to have. And then it also offers sort of opposing viewpoints on these ideas. So what do, what are different sort of people's opinions and viewpoints about it? Excuse me. Now, you will also see down here links to many, many other types of sources that you might go on to read more about this particular subject. Again, when you click into the overview article itself, you will find, related subjects over here. And much like Wikipedia down at the end, you will find links to more resources where you can read about this topic. So the overview article itself might provide enough information for you to write your paper, in combination with your own ideas and your own common knowledge and prior knowledge. But my hope is that the database can also offer you additional resources for learning more about this topic. Now, if you notice down here at the bottom, that thing I mentioned before is waiting here for us. Here is the works cited entry for this particular article. So I could work really smart and just copy this and paste it right over into my essay. And then I've got my works cited entry for this source. Again, I would want to be thoughtful. It's my responsibility to double check that it is correct. I can tell you just by glancing at this one that it is correct. And many of the sources that you look at within this database will include that works cited information. There are some tools over here also within the database that you might find helpful. Again, if you click cite, it's going to give you all the different options for citing. You know, for example, if you wanted to use this for a cite class, you could look up the APA citation. Of course, in English, we always use MLA. Close my citation tools here. You can email yourself the article or save it to your OneDrive or your Google Drive. You can download and save it to your computer if you're concerned about having internet access. You can print it. You can create an account and save your highlights and notes within the article, or you could also email yourself the link. So if that would be helpful, there's some tools in the database that you could think about using. But otherwise, just make sure that you do read that overview article and consider some of the other links that the database provides and whether that might be helpful to you in writing your second essay. So I think that's all I have for you folks this week for the video. As usual, if you have any questions, let me know. And otherwise, I'll look forward to talking with you next week. See you soon. Bye-bye.